make sure that this was a bipartisan event. That's why we invited Frank Bryan. He is a bona fide, and if we had registration in Vermont, he'd be a registered Republican. Frank's great regret in life, I think you were born in Newbury? Right on the border. His great regret in life that his mother had to cross the river to New Hampshire to give birth to him. But in every other respect, he is a total 100% Vermonter. And Frank, for those of you who are not familiar with the university, is considered an outstanding professor. He won the Kidder Award a couple of years ago, which only goes to professors who are voted on for this award by students, faculty, and others. He is the John G. McCullough Professor of Political Science at the University of Vermont. He also enjoys a little bit of sparring. I mean, if you're going to have an opponent, have one that has a sense of humor. He and I were on a debate a couple of years ago sponsored by the Snelling Institute on the 4-year term. Since it hasn't happened yet, I guess you won. But I put up a good fight, and as you might suspect, he was for the 2-year term. I think he also debated some years ago with you, John Dooley, on whether Vermont should secede. You haven't won that one yet. But the way things are going, who knows what's going to be next. But he's been an observer of the political scene. He inspires his students. He knows Vermont so well. And I'm thrilled when I've asked him to speak tonight that he agreed to do so. So please help me welcome Professor Bryan.
Actually, it was conceived in Canaan. I think in a gravel bank just south of the bridge over the Alder Creek. And born in West Georgetown, New Hampshire. But my mother swears to God that the window, it was actually born in a jail. New Hampshire still has county farms, and it was the Coos County Arms Cells, county farm. There was a 4-bed lockup and a 4-bed hospital, and I was born in the hospital wing. The window was open, the air was coming from Vermont, and when they slapped my ass, I gasped, and it was a Vermont breath, so I came pretty close. But and John, one of the great moments, one of the great seasons of my life was debating John Dooley on whether or not Vermont should secede. I found we've never been friends because we travel in different circles and we're both professionals and busy, but what a funny, wise, smart, hot-ass guy he really is. I mean, oh God, I mean, I've got to debate the Justice of the Supreme Court, I'm toast. And he was gentle and kind with me, and we had a good time. I remember in the final debate, they held it in the State House, and Governor Kunin, you remember it was packed. And since I was for secession, I really wanted to begin by saying, as you would with the most distinguished person in the audience, Governor Kunin, et cetera. But I decided to say President Kunin, because you would be President of the United States. And I had told John I was going to say I would rather be in the second free republic of Vermont with Madeleine Kunin, my president, than in the nation with George Bush, my president. But I choked on it, and I just couldn't get it out. But I tried. I'm going to talk about Madeleine here, but I just want to say one thing to you, Governor Kunin. this certainly is a high point of my career that you would ask me. I think you're a little nuts, but but to do that, I remember hitchhiking. Where are we looking now? Hitching into Burlington in the summer of 1958 when I was 18 to take a job for the Vermont Geological Survey. Charles Dahl, some of the older members here would remember he was a full professor of geology then. And they were putting cows across the road right where the Sheraton is that evening. I remember coming in on a Sunday, all alone, $5 in my pocket for the summer. My mother said, take the $5, it'll be enough, they're gonna pay you something. And I looked over here at the university, and of course the elm trees were huge then, and the thing about Burlington was in the late 50s, it was shady. You couldn't see the lake from the top of the hill. I looked at the university and I thought, God, it must be nice to teach there. You wouldn't have to work for a living. It would be just fantastic. You could cruise around and wear dungarees and get paid for it. And now here I am, and it's just absolutely unbelievable. So thank you very much, Governor Kunin. Yeah, I want to talk a little about, seriously about Madeleine Kunin because she's an historical figure, of course, and critically important to the history of Vermont. First, I want to talk about, as a political scientist, what I think her great virtues are. First of all, in the way she became who she is politically. As you all remember, since the 60s into the 70s and 80s, we've had a lot of people that decided they wanted to be governor or go to Congress, and they just announce it and run. They decide they'll come in at the top with no work because they're just such geniuses that we're all going to vote for them. Madeleine Kunin was different. You know, I tell my students if they want a model on how to become successful in politics, do it the Madeleine Kunin way, which is to do it with patience and humility and wisdom, which means you try to get something done in your neighborhood, and if you're successful, you try to get something done in your city, then you run for an election, then you run for the legislature, and you win, and then you become successful in the legislature, and then maybe you run for lieutenant governor, and then you run for governor. And that's the way to do it, but most people don't have the guts and the courage and the staying power to actually trust themselves to do that. But Madeleine Kunin did, and it's amazing to me other people don't follow that route. So I really like the way she got where she was, and that took those characters that she has. The second thing, the way she governed. The way she governed. She had a lot of integrity. You know, Madeleine Kunin was a liberal and proud of it. And she never backed off that. It drove a lot of my friends nuts. But she did that. She never faulted on her mandate. You got what you voted for. And I think we need more of that in politics today. She had that kind of integrity. And she took a lot of shots. I'll never forget your speech when you announced Act 200. And she said, and if the towns don't comply, there will be mandates. And I'm going, there's a stud right there, man. Wow. I mean, she's got the moxie to do that, but she didn't back off she knew that if you were going to do something, you had to take some risks, you had to do it right. And she was willing to do that, and to hell with Stub Earle and other people like that I hung out with in those days. The second thing she did is that she really must love Vermont immensely, even though she's a flatlander. Even more than so many more successful Vermont politicians, because her programmatic agenda was almost completely Vermont, the nitty-gritty from the bottom up. If you remember those days, and they were they were risky. And thirdly, she had immense courage. It's always stood out in my mind, Governor Kunin, about the courage you had. I was doing some figures over the last couple of days just to prepare for this, comparing what we call in political science political capital. The political capital you have as an office holder are the votes you get, the pluralities you get, the majorities. And Madeleine Kunin had almost no money in the bank whatsoever. She won her first race by a whisker. Then she took on nobodies like Bernie Sanders, the quintessential lefty crazy radical, just down out of the hills up in the Northeast Kingdom. And Peter Smith, you remember, Peter was a quintessential Republican, blonde hair, kind of a stoic look. He never looked that happy. Well, he was a beautiful Republican. I mean, just perfect modulation. And you kick both of their butts. I hope he's not here. I don't give a damn whether he's here or not, but actually. But Madeleine Kunin had courage because she went right up to the plate and spent all the capital she had, mortgaged her career, played soft on the futures with no capital to get things done that she believed in. Now, I know I'm going to upset a couple of people here because they tell me there's a lot of Democrats in the room. But the Democrat that followed Madeleine Kunin was just the opposite. That Democrat, as governor, had all kinds of political capital. His average victory margin was something like 28%. I mean, he kicked the hell out of everybody. 73.4% in his re-election against someone named Kelly, right? Remember from no, see, you don't even remember. He knocked the hell out of my buddy John McClary. Of course, John never wanted to be governor anyways. He wanted us to elect a philosopher king, as my colleague Garrison Nelson says, and we refused to do that. But these things that Madeleine Kunin did were very risky. Centralized the school system 20 years before we see it again today. So many things. Madeleine, one of the things I loved your integrity for the most was the raising the drinking age to 21. You remember that. Ronald Reagan, with mind-wrenching hypocrisy, the great conservative states' rights Republican, decided he would force us to, all the states, to raise their drinking age from 18 to 21 with what's called the crossover sanction in political science. And that goes, if you don't raise your drinking age to 21, we won't give you your money to pave your interstates. And that's why I'm a secessionist to this very day. Madeleine running against, I forget what was that year, maybe Snelling actually, or you were, so I don't remember how it was going to go, but Snelling was for 18-year-olds, you were for 21. But as governor, Madeleine Kunin actually went to court to defend Vermont's right to make that decision themselves, even though it was not in their political interest to do that. She did it on principle because she was for the 21-year-old anyways. And that to me was kind of a mark of Madeleine Kunin's commitment to the state and to liberalism with a small L. And when she was governor, she acted like she was going to be governor for a long time in Vermont and wasn't running all over the country to run for some other higher office. And that cost her politically a lot. But that's what we like governors for. And I think she will get great historical credit for that when we write the story of the 20th century in Vermont politics. She'll get great credit for that. But the other couple of things that really interest me about Governor Kunin is how eclectic she is, what a Renaissance woman she is. I mean, she hasn't slowed down a bit. I thought maybe tonight, Madeleine, you'd let your colleagues rest, but no. Remember, this is just starting. It's a new time. We've got to go out and keep fighting. First of all, Madeleine Kunin has written the best single history of politics in Vermont in the 1970s and the 90s that we have in this book, Living a Political Life. This is, by the way, a great book. It's got a great publisher. It reads well. It tells you a story of a woman trying to run a family and run for office. It's funny as the devil. I got a bunch of things I was going to read to you here, but the time grows short. I loved your conflict with Stubb Earle over child abuse on the floor of the legislature. Madeleine tells a story about how, as a woman, she's debating Stubb Earle. Now, you remember old Stubb, he didn't talk in double negatives, he talked in kind of triple negatives. He was from, they called the Earl of Eden, and he was saying stuff like, well, you know, if I want to whip my kid, what's the big problem here? And Madeleine's first reaction, as she writes so beautifully in this book, was that she reacted to that both as a politician, because she needed Stubb Earle's vote on something upcoming, but also as a woman. And she was just so angry, she thought she was going to tackle the guy, physically attack him, almost reacting you mentioned kind of a battered woman syndrome. I mean, here's a guy and you're going to have to, but she doesn't. And she swallows her pride on that. And then in the very next paragraph or two, she talks about getting together with Stubb Earle in the next couple of days on the bottle bill. It's actually the bottle bill. And that showed a sensibility and an empathy, but fundamentally political wisdom. And this book continually tells you that politics is politics. And if you're going to do anything, you have to understand that fundamental principle. And I think that develops empathy in a person. The big problem, by the way, she names names. You ever read this book? Oh, it's great. The only problem, Madeleine, is it has no index. And now, but of course, that was a stroke of genius. You understand why? Because everybody in Vermont that bought it wondered, first of all, did she mention me? So they turned to the index, and there's any. So then what do they got to do? They got to read the damn thing. And it's, I wish I'd thought of that. Get rid of the indexes. Finally, I do think I know a little bit about teaching, and I just want to talk about Madeleine as a teacher. You know, she's on the faculty now at the University of Vermont, and she spends time in our department. She goes to our classes, lectures in our classes if we ask her to. And I've had her come into my classes twice. And I got to tell you straight out, you could have heard a pin drop in those classes. This woman has a presence that's just remarkable. And looking in the eyes of the women in the class, I suddenly realized that there really is something to this notion that we need peers in academia. The women in that class, and she would go through how she became a politician with kids, with all her responsibilities, how difficult it was, how she started small, worked her way up, and it was absolutely spellbinding. And in both cases, we have these teacher reviews that we give our students. And at the end of the semester, they get to write anything they want to, and brother, they're really quite entertaining now and then. But in both the times when Madeleine came to my class, in the question, what else did you like about this course? It was overwhelmingly Madeleine Kunin's visit to class and bring her back again. So she's not just a great, courageous politician. She's also, and This is the How to Do It book for women in politics, Madeleine, and women ought to be happy you wrote this. She's an historian. She's a great writer. She's a funny writer. And she's a teacher. I mean, what else is there? People have asked me to, I give some talks around New England the last couple of years on the great presidents, and Garrison and I often spend time ranking the presidents. And someday I'm going to write something about the governors of Vermont in the 20th century. And just before I retire and go back into the woods. And when you think about Madeleine Kunin, you know, there's only so, luck has an awful lot to do with greatness, especially in something like the presidency. I mean, you've got to have the right times. If nothing's happening, what the hell are you going to do? You know, I mean, it's hard to, but Madeleine Kunin on that is destined for greatness, obviously, because she did something no one has ever done. She became the first woman governor of the state of Vermont, the third in the history of the United States that won independently. That's profound. Even today, only 17%. It's up from 16. In your book, you have it at 16. It's now 17. Rejoice. 17% of the members of Congress, both houses, are women. In Vermont, I think it's up to 37%. We're no longer I think we're third. We were first when you wrote your book. By the way, guess which legislative system in Vermont does best for representing women? Town meeting. Town meeting is the legislative branch of the town. And now, in Vermont town meetings, women represent between 49 and 52% of the attenders in the average town meeting. In other words, there's absolute equality on gender in town meetings. So the citizens that vote for the United States budget, in that vote, women are outnumbered 17 to 100%. And in the state legislatures, it's about 37%. But in the little towns of Vermont, the citizens that vote for their budget and everything else in the town are equally men and women. So Madeleine, by definition, already is a great governor. But because of what she did once she was elected, she's more than great. As I said, she had the courage to spend her political capital, even if she had to mortgage to get it, to do things that she believed. And I know, because I was against damn near every one of them, and I can land it perfectly. But in all seriousness, author, teacher, parent, gutsy, courageous, liberal in the classical and traditional sense of that term, who loved Vermont enough to give her life to it, not as a springboard for anything else, but for this state of Vermont. Thank you very much. I'm all done. Oh, oh no, my wife's on. Later, baby. There you go.